The United States Constitution is often treated like a sacred document, something fixed, flawless, and untouchable. But the real story is far more interesting. It wasn't written in peaceful times or during a moment of national unity. It was written when the country was weak, divided, and on the brink of collapse. Understanding how this document came together and why it still works today doesn't require legal training or political experience. It just requires a clear look at the ideas that shaped it. So in the next few minutes, we're going to break down the entire Constitution simply, clearly, and in a way that finally makes sense. This is the U.S. Constitution explained. The strange truth about the United States Constitution is this. It wasn't written during calm, stable times. It was written when the country was falling apart. After winning independence from Britain, the young United States was anything but united. It was 13 mini-countries pretending to be one nation. Each state printed its own money, made its own laws, taxed its neighbors, and often refused to cooperate. The federal government was so weak, it couldn't raise an army, pay debts, or enforce anything. The Articles of Confederation, the nation's first governing system, sounded poetic, but worked terribly in practice. The new country had won a war, but was losing the peace. By the mid-1780s, the chaos became impossible to ignore. Economies crashed, states fought, farmers rebelled in violent uprisings like Shays' Rebellion. Politicians and ordinary citizens feared that the country they just created might collapse within a decade. Something had to change. So in 1787, 55 delegates traveled to Philadelphia to fix the government. At least that was the official plan. The real plan became much bolder. Behind locked doors and covered windows in the heat of a Philadelphia summer, they decided not to fix the old system, but to write an entirely new one. Something stronger, something clearer, something built to last. The U.S. Constitution. To understand it, you don't need a law degree. You just need to understand the three ideas that shaped everything inside it. The first idea is separation of powers. No one gets all the power. Not the president, not Congress, not the courts. The founders had just fought a king. They weren't interested in creating another one. So they split the powers of government into three branches each with a different job. Congress makes the laws. The president enforces them. The courts interpret them. Three separate centers of authority, each limited by the other two. The second idea is checks and balances. Imagine each branch holding a shield and a sword. They can protect themselves and they can push back against the others. Congress can pass laws, but the president can veto them. The president can appoint judges, but the Senate can reject them. The Supreme Court can strike down laws it finds unconstitutional. Every branch has a way to stop the others from becoming too powerful. The founders didn't trust power, so they designed a system where power constantly monitors itself. The third idea is federalism. Power isn't only divided among branches, it's also divided between the national government and the states. Some powers belong to Washington, like printing money and declaring war. Others belong to the states, like running schools and local elections. America is a balancing act between local authority and national unity. With these ideas in mind, the delegates wrote the Constitution in 7 parts. These parts, called articles, shape the entire structure of the government. Article 1 creates Congress, the legislative branch, and gives it more detail than any other part of the Constitution. It sets up the House of Representatives and the Senate, and explains exactly what Congress can and cannot do. If the Constitution were a blueprint, Article 1 is the biggest room on the page. Article 2 creates the presidency, the executive branch. It defines the president's powers, responsibilities, and limits. The founders wanted a leader strong enough to act, but not strong enough to rule like a monarch. Article 3 creates the judicial branch, the courts, including the Supreme Court. It is surprisingly short, but incredibly powerful. It gives the courts the authority to interpret the Constitution and resolve disputes. Article 4 explains how states should treat each other and how new states can join the Union. It turns 13 rival territories into a single cooperative country. Article 5 describes how the Constitution can be amended. The founders knew their work wasn't perfect. They knew future generations would need to fix mistakes or adapt to new realities. So they built a system for change. Article 6 includes the Supremacy Clause, the idea that the Constitution is the highest law of the land above any state law. This keeps the country unified under one legal framework. Article 7 explains how the document would be approved. It required 9 states to ratify it. And after fierce debates across the nation, they eventually did. But even after ratifying the Constitution, many Americans didn't trust the new government. They feared it was too strong, too centralized, too much like the monarchy they had escaped. So the founders made a deal. They added 10 amendments, promises to protect individual freedoms. These 10 amendments became the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech, religion, the press, assembly, and petition. It is the firewall between government power and individual expression. The Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms. The third says the government can't force citizens to house soldiers. The fourth protects against unreasonable searches. The fifth gives rights to the accused and prevents the government from taking property without fair compensation. The sixth guarantees a fair, speedy trial. The seventh guarantees the right to a jury in civil cases. The eighth prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. The ninth says people have more rights than the Constitution lists. And the 10th protects states' rights, reinforcing federalism. These amendments persuaded the states to trust the new government, and they remain some of the most debated sentences in American history. Over time, the Constitution continued to grow and adapt. After the Civil War, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments abolished slavery, guaranteed equal protection, and expanded voting rights. These amendments reshaped the nation, addressing the Constitution's greatest failures. In 1920, the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. In 1971, the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. In total, the Constitution has been amended 27 times. The founders didn't design a perfect government. They designed a flexible one. Yet people still misunderstand the Constitution. They often imagine it as a flawless guidebook, but the Constitution is not perfect. It has changed many times. It has been interpreted and reinterpreted. Some Supreme Court decisions were celebrated, others were later overturned. The Constitution is not frozen in 1787. It is alive, shaped by each generation. And that is exactly what the founders intended. They didn't know what the world would look like centuries later. They didn't predict airplanes, smartphones, artificial intelligence, or a nation of 330 million people. They didn't pretend to foresee the future. Instead, they created a system for dealing with the future, a structure where power is limited, rights are protected, and citizens have the ability to correct mistakes. Why does all of this still matter today? Because the Constitution is the operating system of American democracy. It prevents concentrated power. It protects individual liberty. It balances competing interests. And it has guided the country through wars, crises, depressions, and transformations. It has flaws, it has gaps, it has controversies, but it also has incredible resilience. The Constitution didn't create stability overnight. It created a framework where stability could grow, and nearly 250 years later, it continues to shape the nation's political life. The real genius of the Constitution isn't that it solved every problem. It's that it gave future generations the tools to solve their own. From a nation on the edge of collapse to one of the world's oldest continuous democracies, the Constitution has been the guide, the guardrail, and sometimes the battlefield for the American experiment. It didn't create a perfect government. It created a system that people could improve over time. And that system, a mix of structure, flexibility, and accountability, is why the Constitution still matters today. If this explanation helped you see the Constitution in a new way, imagine what other complex ideas can become easy once we break them down. The world is full of systems, laws, and moments in history that seem complicated only because no one has taken the time to explain them simply. If you want more videos that turn civics history and big ideas into clear stories, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and tell me what topic you want explained next. Thanks for watching Plain Explain, where clarity always comes first.